Okay.
Hello.
I gotta work on that
It's
ending
very
of that.
abrupt.
It was. I thought I had a transition at the end of it, and I was like, I don't think I ever did do that. My bad.
Yeah, that was
It
great. I
used
loved it.
to have a it used to be 10 minutes, and it used to end with, like, the rocked out version of Jingle Bells, which I loved, but then I was also like, "It doesn't make any sense."
Fantastic. All time of year. Jingle Bells is good.
It's all
Um,
good, man.
but
Well,
sometimes when something's a little more abrupt, it's like it forces you. I don't know if you have ADD like me, it just forces you to change track and like, oh, I'm in this now. This is what I'm doing now.
I am the opposite. So I have ADHD too, but it's also like when I shift topics rapidly, all of a sudden my brain's like halting, stutter. Unless I'm the one shifting the topic, it doesn't go well. That's the only exception. Well, let's go ahead and introduce ourselves. My name is Logan Edmonds. I'm CEO of TTS. Will, why don't you go ahead?
Yep. My name's Will Brooks, Fifth Wall Solutions. We are cyber insurance. We'll call us a super broker, but we're a wholesaler. But I'm the channel chief at Fifth Wall, so connect with MSPs, all that good stuff, helping them understand cyber insurance, like we're doing today, helping clients
Yeah.
and all that good stuff.
So this is a cool time to have you on the show because I get asked about cyber insurance all the time, and I always have to hedge every single time. I am not an insurance agent. I am not licensed to advise on cyber insurance. I can give you my dummy as a cybersecurity expert what I know, but even then, it's got asterisks around it of what I can
Yep.
and cannot advise you on. So today, having you on the show is kind of cool because you are okay to advise on this stuff. So we can open up the floor to all the questions.
All the questions.
Yeah, so TTS, you kind of took a good job explaining yourself. Let me explain TTS to those of the audience might be new. So my job at TTS is twofold. I'm the CEO, but I'm also the chief security officer. I'm the cybersecurity guy, the vision guy, and I specialize in advising small to medium-sized businesses on the best avenues and practices of managing their risk as it relates to protecting their bottom line from cyber attacks. Because let's be clear, cyber attacks do impact bottom line revenues. That's sort of the whole crux of what we're talking about today. For me, I'm based out of Columbus, Ohio. I have a lovely wife who works with us, as well as my 2-year-old daughter, Addie. She has me wrapped around her finger. My kid is awesome. Yeah, so Will, tell us a little about yourself real quick before we get started.
Yeah, I'll give you a brief rundown here. So I live in New York, specifically on Long Island. We have our first daughter on the way, first kid on the way. Super pumped
Congrats.
about that. Thanks, man. Super pumped. It's gonna be awesome. And it's actually funny. I worked in standard property and casualty insurance about 6 years ago,
Okay.
and I did it for about a year and a half, and walked away from it saying, I don't want to do this. Not that I dislike insurance or anything like that, but it's just like the grind of selling and having to have, it's always about the uh just closing the deal, winning the business. Like obviously
Sure.
that's how we grow, but like to be able to shift into a role on cyber insurance now where my super nerdy tech brain can connect with the insurance background I have and I get to educate on this stuff, like it's like the trifecta of fun for me. So
It's
it's
absolutely true too. With like individual agents, one of the adage is true. I've never met a single professional who's on the phone more than an individual agent. Like we sell them all the time, and like it's genuinely hard to get some agents on the phone sometimes because not because they're being unpleasant or dodging our calls, just literally they're on the phone all
sure.
day long, hammering and hustling. And I've mad respect. Don't get me wrong, but obviously not for everyone.
Yeah, it is. It takes a special kind of person, you know. They need to love that kind of stuff, and that's where that's the success right there. So
So
yeah,
let's go ahead and dive into the main topic today because I know we're on a 45-minute time zone here. Um, Insure and secure. I said earlier we could also change the title of this to insecure no insure, right? Like these two things are very much tied together when it comes to cyber insurance. And the big thing that our audience has asked me a lot is what changed, right? What
yep,
changed? Like why is this different? I was able to get cyber insurance back when I started my business in 2017, 2018. It was no big deal, right? Go down to my local brokerage, fill out a couple pieces of paper with a couple yes no questions, sign my signature, and I got $1 million in coverage for like $800 a year. um,
yeah, it's cheap.
Mr.
Yeah.
Mr. Insurance person, can you do that anymore?
No, so I don't know if you heard about this thing in, I don't know if you heard about this thing in 2020 called a global pandemic, but it did something where just about every business under the sun said if we want to survive, we have to go to remote. We're going to have to work remote, and it changed the culture of the way business operates, I think, globally now. But um, the problem was to get a cyber insurance policy back then, you didn't need to have any security in place. You just could get one.
Mhm.
And now you had this problem where everyone was getting policies, nobody had security, world goes remote. All these businesses are now functioning online, and carriers had claims skyrocket. So they lost a ton of money. And because they lost a ton of money, they said, we got to correct. And so they overcorrected it and started requiring tons of security, and clients didn't know what to do about it. So costs went up, requirements went up. I mean, you have it right there, right? So there were new
Premium
standards, there
coverage
were new
went up,
things
right?
necessary. It was
The
insane.
premium
What
is
was that?
the premium's basically 3x overnight, and they never really
Mhm.
came down too. Even just
Yeah.
getting the policy itself, there was a cost, not let alone the requirements.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, looking at this, right? Like this is pretty textbook. I don't think anybody's mind's gonna be exploded on this slide, right?
Right.
Look at car insurance, look at auto insurance, look at everything. Safety standards are changing, right? And the carriers, at the end of the day, because they're the ones footing the bill, are the ones that determine what those standards are.
Mhm.
And it's like anything in life. If you either you comply with their minimum standard or you just don't get coverage. And that's part of the thing. Like great example right now, we're talking about property and casualty. My brother has an older home. He's like a 110-year-old home. And this year he got a notice. Yeah, I know, right? And it's a project of love. If Shane's watching, I know it's your passion project, buddy. No, power to you. But he basically got it. He got a notice this year from his carrier saying, "Hey, we noticed that roof's 25 years old. If you want us to keep insuring you, you need to go replace the roof, right? Like, because they know, statistically speaking, that roof's going to fall down under their watch, and they're trying to mitigate their risk. And he doesn't have to get a new roof, but they also don't have to give him re-up his coverage.
Right.
So that's how it goes.
Yep.
And,
Yeah.
and
And
everybody, oh, go ahead, go ahead.
well, just insurance in general too. I mean, when you think of the cyber side, and you talked about the costs going up and all this crazy stuff, and insurance bases its cost, it bases its requirements and its discounts and all that kind of stuff off of the law of large numbers. And up until 2020, there weren't a ton of large numbers when it came to claims data and all this kind of stuff. So carriers didn't really know what to do. So we kind of say, hey, look, I know it's expensive, but it's almost like premium is where it needed to be in the first place now.
Yeah.
It's the other stuff that's more surprising to me that we'll get into, like the security requirements and that kind of stuff. That's the stuff that
Yeah,
scares me that it wasn't a thing.
and I think it's probably worth talking about. Everybody understands what this picture means, right? On an insurance perspective, you get more than a few speeding tickets, and you get a very awkward email or phone call from your car insurance carrier saying, "Hey, your risk just went up. So either if we do cover you, it's going to be way more expensive, or you need to go find somebody else."
Right.
Every time I get a speeding ticket, what always kills me? It's not that I have to pay the speeding ticket. I've had 2 speeding tickets my entire life, but every single time it was, crap, this is going to be on my record for the next 7 years. And I'm
Yep.
going to have to explain this every single time I get car insurance.
Yep.
Cyber's moving in that direction. I think it's worth talking about, where what you do and your history is going to impact your insurability going forward. Is that a fair statement to say?
Sort of, yeah. So one thing that is interesting and a little different from maybe this illustration is that the key difference comes down to the underwriting and the specific realities of the cyber industry.
Okay.
I think there's this piece where if you suffer an incident, that's now on your permanent record, right? But in today's world, there are things you can do to mitigate the reason, to fix the reasons why that
Yeah.
incident happened in the first place. So carriers want to see not just they don't, if all they see is, oh, you have a speeding ticket on your record, they're like, oh, you're a bad driver. You're a higher risk for me. But if they see, oh, you had a speeding ticket, but then you did all this stuff so that you don't get speeding tickets in the future, they're now going to see you as a better risk. So if your business suffers a cyber incident and you do nothing about it to fix the problem, yeah, carriers are going to drop you like
Like it's hot.
real quick. Yeah,
I,
drop
I,
you like you're hot. Yeah, I was
I
trying
like
to come up with an illustration, but it couldn't come up. It was like hotcakes. I don't know.
So let's dive into this then, full force, because this is a great conversation in terms of the big word in insurance land, right? I
Yep.
always think too is gross negligence and willful misconduct, right? Like that's
Yep.
sort of the worst case scenario, and I think it's important to couch language here. And anyone who's in the know in the insurance world knows the carriers aren't trying to be the bad guy here.
No.
They're not out to get you. They're not out to drop you and nickel and dime you. They're just trying to achieve baseline profitability because that's what they need to in order to stay in business, right? Like no one can operate indefinitely at a loss. Totally get that, right? So recently we had a very interesting court case about a year and a half ago that came up that hit all the major headlines, both in insurance land and in cybersecurity land. Travelers Insurance, that whole debacle.
Yep.
Travelers sued a company called ICS and won a settlement because ICS's inadequate cybersecurity was deemed a violation of its policy. Are you familiar with the story? I should probably ask that first.
Very much so.
Do you want to take us through sort of the broad strokes of what happened here?
Yeah.
I
So
like your perspective on it.
yeah, let me preface this with there's this case created a rumor mill that carriers do not want to pay claims, and that's not true.
Absolutely.
Because think of it this way: as soon as Travelers denied that claim, now Travelers has a big red letter. I mean, it already is because Travelers' colors are red. But besides that, they have a scarlet letter on their on their particular company now saying Travelers won't pay cyber claims. They don't want that bad publicity. I mean, that's the reality. Is you're not going to buy their product. There are tons of cyber carriers out there, and they're competing, so they want you to buy their product. And if they have the idea that they don't pay claims, then we have a problem. So let me preface with that. But the story goes, you had ICS. They had a policy put in place, and I'm going to make this real, like explain like I'm five kind of thing. They had a policy in place, and they suffered a data incident. They suffered a breach. And they went to Travelers and they said, "Hey, we're submitting a claim." And Travelers sent in forensics with, the cyber forensics. And the misconception here is that the forensics goes in to try and show the carrier how they don't have to pay the claim. That's not what forensics.
Not at all. I do forensics myself as a side of our business,
Yeah.
and all we're trying to do is give the carrier a clear picture of what's going on and how, as best we can, right? As best how it happened, so they can pass that to the breach coach, and the breach coach can properly advise the carrier, "Hey, this is what you legally need to do in order in the event of the claim, not just the damages, but also the legalities around it," right? Like, it's in our best interest as the forensics and I are to be as detailed as possible. Don't get me wrong, but we don't have a narrative or an objective when we go in there.
Bingo. So forensics needs to come in to tell you why that incident happened in the first place, so you as the insured can correct it so it doesn't happen again, right? I mean, we just talked about all that. So forensics went in and they determined, this came in because the client did not have multi-factor authentication turned on. That thing where you put a code to the simple version that's maybe not that secure, where you get a text message to your phone and you put the code in.
Wasn't it on like one thing? Like they had it on like a couple things, and like the majority of the environment was turned off, and it was like that was kind of the crux. Yeah. Okay.
And so because it was disabled, it was the cyber attack got in. Now, when they applied for coverage, the company said they did have MFA, and there's the problem. Travelers didn't go in and say, "Try to find a way for us to not pay this claim." What they did say was, guys, the reason this incident happened is blatantly because a control was turned off that you said you had. And we wouldn't have given you coverage in the first place if you didn't have that control in place. So we're not paying this claim, and they didn't have to. And that's the claim was denied. Obviously, this sparked the rumor mill, but the real important piece here is not carriers don't pay claims, because they do. The important piece here is you need to have security, and you need to understand that this is not like when you go to your insurance broker and they're like, "Oh, well, here's your auto policy. I can check a couple of boxes here I know are going to help save you some money," and this kind of thing. Like, no, this is if you have an incident here and you don't check these boxes correctly, good luck.
Well, it's a misattestation, right? Like lying on insurance is never a good idea. First off, let's just be clear.
Ever.
Yeah. But also too, like the carrier is absorbing their whole business is to transfer risk, right? Their transference of risk. They want to have a rough understanding of what risk they're transferring. If you misrepresent something that is material like that, like MFA is it's honestly considered grossly negligent nowadays not to have that turned on in your critical systems. Like that's a big element of materiality that the carrier reasonably could not have predicted, and they should have known, because guess what? In the warranty, you attested you had it. So I actually, in that scenario, look at Travelers and say, I can't demonize them for this, because that's not what they signed up for. It was on there's what I call a shared bond of competence, right? Like there's a bare minimum the carrier expects, and they're not hiding the ball. They're laying it out in that warranty form for them to insure you. It's your responsibility to meet that standard, not theirs.
Yeah. And so to that end, right? And this is this is the piece that I always bring up to clients because, and you know what, we talk to a lot of cybersecurity people too, and everyone wants automation today. Everyone wants things to just work. You know, it's like, oh, you need to be able to see that. It's like, no, look, cyber insurance in general has always been a good faith contract. When you sign when you submit an application that is signed and you pay your premium, you are attesting that the things on that application are true. So if they are not, then you void the contract. I mean, it's just it's that simple.
I would expect the same thing, right? Like in my world, I sign contracts all the time. If I don't do what I promise in the contract, or one of the parties doesn't do, for example, I don't get paid, I'm not going to keep providing the services of the contract, right? Like I'm going to issue breach, and if I don't get paid, like no money, no me.
That-
Like it's a fair understanding here, and well, I think the same logic applies to exactly the scenario we're painting. So let's go through the agenda real quick of what we're going to talk about because I'm having a great time, and we might need to skip a few slides. That's totally fine.
We'll be back here next week, same time, same place.
Four broad things we're trying to identify. First and foremost, is cyber insurance necessary? I mean, I think we can be on the record in saying we'll make our argument, but the resounding answer is yes. If you don't hear anything else, it is necessary. What is the 2020? Yeah. No, I wish. The 2024 market has its own unique flares and nuances, and I'm definitely gonna want your take on that, Will. There are new standards of care that are totally different in the last 5 years, and they're still changing to varying degrees. And then obviously our goal would be, base recommendation for the people watching the show. What should their action plan be? Do they have sufficient coverage? Do they have coverage at all? What kind of coverage should they look for? This is where I'm really excited to have Will kind of give his take on this stuff as someone who can speak on these things. So first and foremost, yes, cyber insurance is necessary. Will, this is a must. This is like if you're a company and does professional services and you don't have E&O. You need to have your errors and omissions. You need to have your general liability, and you need to have your cyber insurance. In my opinion, would you agree with that?
I mean, every business that I can think of today has internet exposure. And if you have internet exposure, if you have employees or payroll or anything, you have sensitive data, and therefore you should have a cyber policy. I mean, it's that simple.
Agreed. And the
And it
stats
should
are
be
not.
a comprehensive one, which I know we'll talk about in a little while. It shouldn't just be some generic nonsense.
Yeah, let's save that for a little further in the slide deck. That's a whole separate topic.
Foreshadow.
It's a foreshadow there. I mean, this is a problem. It's honestly equivalent to how flood insurance works, right? Like it's hard to predict how bad it is, except that it hits for a giant swath of the SMB markets, small to medium businesses. I mean, 53% of SMBs, for best available statistics, were hit by some form of cyber attack in the past year. Now, that doesn't go into how successful it was, what are the damages, right? But they were hit because you were talking about automation earlier. Unfortunately, in my world, a lot of times automation is more of an adversary than a friend. Don't get me wrong, you need to automate. But what we're seeing is these attackers are automating their stuff. They're not targeting businesses. They're just pulling the digital equivalent of a shotgun out and pointing towards the general vicinity of the internet and spraying and praying. So everybody gets hit sooner or later. And it's getting worse. We saw a 5% rise even in the past year.
It's wild.
46% of uninsured SMBs when they're full-blown cyber attack, because not all incidences are cyber attacks, but all cyber attacks are incidents, that scenario, right? But when they have a full-blown event, right, incident, right, like a breach, 46% of uninsured companies that are small businesses never fully recover. I was talking to, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, can we hover on that stat for a second? Because regardless, 46% or 10%, doesn't matter. Think about you as a small business owner, what it takes to start a business. You put blood, sweat, and tears, overtime, your own money. Takes you years to even get into the black or the red? I don't remember. Whatever the positive one is.
Black. Yeah. No, the red's the one we want to stay away with. That's why
the red's the bad one.
Red's bad.
Exactly. So getting into it takes you years to even get into the black, and then in one simple cyber attack where you accidentally clicked a link and something happened, you lose everything. Like, that's not to paint a picture of doom and gloom. I just picture like the reality of how much work goes into this. And then that something as stupid as clicking a malicious link can destroy all of it. Like, that makes me that honestly hurts my heart.
Let's talk here for a second too, because this is uninsured, but also even insured, there's pain. I was talking with Dr. I can't pronounce her last name right now. I apologize. She's watching Dr. Azukor. Azudakor. I can't say it right. Christine's a great lady. She's the CEO of Cyber Pop-Up. They work with carriers. And she told a very powerful story in the last time we did this event of basically a company that she worked with where they did have proper coverage, right? But the event was so catastrophic, they had to temporarily furlough 90% of their staff for the 2.5 to 3 months it took for the claim to pay out because forensics needed to do its thing. The breach coach needed to do its thing. Cyber insurance, we'll get into this later, it doesn't pay immediately. It's like any insurance, right? Like there's due diligence that happens on the carrier side before they're going to issue a check. And this stuff is expensive.
Yeah.
Like if you have a cyber event, I can, happy Friday. Yeah. Hey, Brendan's on. Hi, Brendan. Sorry. I like the Fin guys. They're fun. So, I mean, cyber insurance, it's needed, but you also need to bridge that gap and have a plan to bridge that gap between event happened and I get paid for the claim.
That's so key. And we'll get into it later. We'll talk about it. I'm all about that.
Yeah, and the last thing, I've seen this from my side of things. 100%. I've seen more and more business-to-business contracts that require the end business to maintain a certain level of cyber insurance, and it doesn't always make sense. I've been seeing it in the hospitality sector. I've seen it for like elder care now, like where they go and partner with vendors. Like you have to have it, and if you don't have it, you don't get the business.
Yeah, two things to bring up there. First of all, the first thing has nothing to do with this, but I don't know if you've seen Anchorman, where he says 60% of the time it works every time, and you just showed a slide.
You said Anchorman, this is not going to be good.
You just showed a slide that said 60% and then said 100%. It just made me think of that. Anyway, way off. Going to what you just said. The crazy thing about a lot of those contract requirements you run into, they don't make sense. Like someone will be like, we saw one recently where they said, we want you to carry 50 million in cyber coverage. And we're like, you are not going to win any no one's going to even want to bid on your contract because they would pay more for the coverage than they would get from your contract.
Absolutely.
So it's part of the education is helping people understand that it's not like general liability. It's a totally different thing. But at the same time, the reality that contracts do have cyber requirements and that while they can be negotiated, they are there is a thing, and they're becoming more and more popular.
Yeah. Also, too, requirements are starting to come up on the governmental side more.
I want this to be a thing so bad.
It's going to be a thing. It's like workers' comp, right? As an employer in a state, I have to carry workers' comp. I have choices of who I carry workers' comp through. Don't get me wrong. In Ohio, I get multiple choices, but I have to carry it. We are starting to see more and more, and the wheels of government turn slow. But various regulations indicating or even sometimes full on stating you have to have cyber insurance, and both on the private and the public sector. What do I mean by private? Well, great example of this, Charles Schwab. Charles Schwab, as of 2 years ago, major RIA provider. If you do anything in the investment world, like as an investment advisor, you might be a Charles Schwab partner, right? They basically came out in 2021 and said, look, if you don't carry $1 million in coverage, you cannot work with us anymore. We will kick you from our brand.
Wow.
They gave everyone underneath the banner a year to go get the coverage. Now, I don't know if that's still the case. I haven't done my market research in the last 3 years, but that was one that I had a lot of customers asking about, like, is it hard to get cyber insurance? And this was, of course, mid 2021. I was like, yes, it is very hard. We need to get started on this.
It's going to take you a while, so let's get moving.
Yeah, and also the last thing you touched on this earlier. We can talk about it now. Do not assume that you have adequate cyber insurance coverage on your regular business insurance policies. Will, this is the part where I really want you to take people through. Why should they not assume this?
So first thing I say is, do you recall having a conversation with your agent about cyber insurance? And a lot of times we're like, oh yeah, okay. Did you spend time filling out an application specific for cyber insurance? Like, I don't remember that. So if that's my first piece. If your agent just says, hey, do you want to add cyber? And then you don't have to do, and it's just a yes or no question and that's it. You probably do not have adequate cyber insurance coverage. And that's a very key component because a comprehensive cyber policy has 19 different line items of coverage on it. And a lot of those stem because there are multiple types of cyber attacks that exist. So you brought that up earlier, right? That with that small business stat, 46% of businesses, well, that's based on certain types, but there are multiple kinds of cyber attacks that can happen, and a comprehensive policy will protect you from the gamut versus a general liability add-on endorsement whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Typically, those are third-party coverages. They don't do a whole lot. They don't really protect your business. You're not getting things like business interruption. You're missing out on very key coverages that we're not thinking about. And are we going to go into coverages later, or is this my time
Yeah,
to
no,
just?
we're gonna go into coverages. We're gonna go into
All right,
coverages.
let's. We'll wait. We'll wait. We'll wait.
So looking at this kind of a thing, I think that's true. I get a lot of these policies, and I always kick them to my preferred agents, right? Because again, I'm not advised, I'm qualified to make recommendations, but even
Sure.
in my knowledge, I know I get a lot of these. I have $100,000 of some kind of coverage attached to my E&O. Is that sufficient? Go talk to the agent, right? Because honest truth is, what I've been seeing is more and more. I want to see most businesses, and this is just my 2 cents, right? Somewhere around $1 million in aggregate across the board. And obviously every policy is different, sublimits, etc. I just know how expensive incident response gets. I know how expensive
Yeah.
the payout gets, and I want to make sure they're never going to run up against the edge of their limits. And that's been my take. Would you agree with that, or is it your mileage may vary kind of a scenario?
No, I think that's a good way to look at it. And a lot of times, I mean, just to real, I'm not going to go into detail here, but a lot of times your limits are derived by your revenue.
Mm,
So it's like when you consider business interruptions, I think um a large determining factor of how much coverage you should carry. Because like if you're a $1 million company, so you're making $1 million a year, and your business goes down for the average ransom 14 to 16 days or whatever, well,
sorry.
your daily loss of income is going to be a lot less than someone who's making 25 million a year as a business. So
Yes.
that all plays a factor. And so when you think pricing, when you think limits, it's not one size fits all. And that's something
I've
we're
also
very.
seen like business models too, depending on the coverage and your risk mitigation. Like CPAs, for example, I've seen way more aggressive sublimits on like financial fraud, just because the carrier knows its risk factor, and if they feel like something's not being handled appropriately and that they want to hedge their bets, sometimes they'll say, hey, we're only going to cover you my $1 million aggregate. But I've seen like you only get $250,000 in coverage.
Yeah.
Financial fraud, because we get it's your highest risk, and we're not reasonably comfortable with the size of your business covering more than that.
Yeah.
And again, it is communicated clearly up front. As long as you have a proper agent and advisor walking you through this stuff. I think a problem is a lot of businesses either A, don't really spend the time to read their policies like
Oh
they
yeah.
should, or
I'm
B, they never really thought they needed to, right? Like they thought their agent was just taking care of it.
Yeah. Let me put it this way. I have some insurance agents friends who are cyber minded and they're excellent, right? I mean, that's the thing. When you have someone who's cyber minded, who really geeks out on cyber, takes the time to learn and understand it, you can be a powerhouse in the insurance agent industry. However,
Mm,
when you consider a lot of agents that are out there who have been doing property and casualty for 30 years, so 3 decades of homeowners, auto, business liability, that kind of stuff, and all of a sudden cyber comes on the scene and is changing rapidly, they don't want to take the time to really engage that stuff. And I don't blame them. They're
let's
closing
dive
they're
into.
close.
Oh,
Yeah,
go ahead.
go ahead.
I
That's
was
it.
gonna say, let's dive into those changes real quick, because I mean we're talking a lot about changes, but I don't know if we're painting a descriptive enough picture of what's changed. So let's just put the
Sure.
numbers, right? Like 2016, the carrier loss ratios were somewhere around 67%, right? Like that's a very
Which is
comfortable rock. That's
yeah.
great. That's amazing. Like they're making money at that point. Then come 2020, 4 years later, they're taking 114% losses. That is a red alarm, 5 alarm fire, right? Like
They're
talk
losing money.
about they're losing big money at that point, not like insignificant. They're losing, I mean, they're double digits in the percentage mark. That's a big deal for a carrier. So,
Huge.
and how did they respond in 2020, 2021? They jacked up premiums, they reduced coverages, and they tightened their underwriting standards, because they knew how to do that. And you said it yourself. They were just trying to figure things out, and they may have gone a little overboard, but I think they were running their own risk ratio, saying, hey, maybe it's better for us just to go overboard and tighten it back down in the other direction after we're sure it works, than
Yeah.
to undershoot that. And
To
is that your take on that?
For the most part, to be fair, the reduction of coverages piece, I you only really saw often based on that additional piece where you brought up the tightening standards.
Yes.
And you're still seeing that where you have some carriers who will just flat out deny coverage of people if they don't have the right security, but you have other ones who will provide a policy, but they'll remove things like ransomware coverage from your policy because you don't have good enough security. Why would you get a cyber policy and not have ransomware coverage is beyond me. Um, Also, I have to make a note. It's not Brendan's birthday, or at least I don't think it is. I just I created this practice where I just say happy birthday randomly to people because it confuses everyone and it's so entertaining. My favorite time to do it is when someone's leaving a room full of people. You say happy birthday to that person, and then they can't
Everyone
leave
cheers.
because everyone's saying happy birthday to them. It's great. I'm a
ADHD,
troll.
scroll ADHD. Okay, I mean it's working, right? Like profitability's back up on the cyber insurance carrier last time I checked. Now I know this is still an active thing, and that's not bad. Like I want the carriers to make a profit because I want them to stick around because I want them to be there to transfer my risk, right? Like I don't like the idea of a world without cyber insurance. That's a very scary world for me. I have to hold that bag by myself. But
Yeah.
you need to understand, I think, that going from 114% loss ratios to getting profitable relatively quickly, that required a lot of bold moves on the carrier's part, right? Like they had to be very aggressive to pull that off. So what does the changes mean for the people watching this show, right? Like what does it mean for them? And we've stayed pretty high level at this point in talking about market trends and ratio losses, but it basically does come down to, and again, I'm not dinging the carriers. Like that's not what I'm saying here. This is where it probably needs to be at. It was they were over-insuring maybe before, but the premiums are fairly high now. I pay for my $2 million policy a year, and I'm the only policy I can talk about, right? I can talk about my own policy. I pay about $6,000 a year right now, and for our business. The coverages do have strict requirements for me. Like I have some coverages that get the full aggregate, some I'm only getting a sub-limit on because of my business model and my risk coverage and what the carriers want to entertain. And I do have to go through the underwriting standard. That warranty form is a bit of a bear. Every year I have to sit down and really spend my time on it because I want to get it right. That's what this means for anybody who's looking to gain cyber insurance. Do you disagree with anything on the slide? Or
no,
is this
I would just add things. I would say the additional things you started seeing were non-renewals from carriers. You started to see carriers just dropping your business. And here's the crazy part.
I got dropped by Lloyd's in London. Yeah, I got dropped by Lloyd's in London for no reason. I had no claims, something that 2021, they emailed me and said, yep, you're gone in 20 days. And I had to work with my brokerage to find a new carrier as quickly as possible.
So no reason other than carrier appetite change. There was that volatile 2020, 2021, especially 2021 was volatile. So we would quote a client, quote a company, and it'd be a good quote, right? I mean, for what it was. The coverage was great, the pricing was decent, and carriers were very hard lined. Like our quotes expire in 30 days. 30 days would go by, the client would come back and say, oh, you know what? I actually do think I want to bind that. So we'd go to the carrier and say, hey, can we put this in place? They'd rerun the quote and say, we're not accepting this risk anymore. So in 30 days, appetites were changing like that, where they were saying, we're not taking on schools. We're not taking on municipalities. We're not just people were getting hit left and right, and carriers were just changing things up. So it's the Wild West, and it's been staying that way for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's harder to qualify for first-time coverage. It can be hard depending on your business to renew, especially if you have a previous claim that you haven't made active changes on to improve your quality.
Absolutely.
You make a claim and you're not making dramatic changes to your business model to reduce your risk. Carrier's going to look at that and not have a favorable opinion. Also, it's kind of hard to know what the best rate is, in my opinion. I keep hearing all kinds of stuff because a lot of agents, I have a certain segment of agents I trust that know about this because, like you said, a lot of agents just don't know how to shop this.
You're not wrong.
It's harder to get. It's harder to keep. They're properly managing the risk. There is more scrutiny now when you file a claim. It can because there's more implications for the carrier. They need to do stuff with this. They can't just say, "Oh, great, we'll write a check." Right? You got to do the IR. You got to make sure the legal requirements are getting higher and higher. Everybody's getting regulated, and the carrier's got to pay out the penalties. Right? Like that is part of the deal.
100%.
If you're not, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, if you fall, a lot of people don't know this, but like the gross negligence willful misconduct standard, right? Like if you're not actively trying to stay on top of this, you're going to run a risk of falling in that category. For example, if you don't turn MFA on your organization, especially if you checked a warranty form saying you had MFA, not only is it you didn't attest right in the warranty form, that's considered, like I said, borderline gross negligence now. Like courts even acknowledge that. Like you need to turn on MFA, especially if you're telling
even if there's no like direct definition, even if there's no direct definition to gross negligence, I mean, even or there is a definition to gross negligence, but what would be considered that on a cyber policy? Why risk it?
Exactly.
Security awareness training is a great example. I mean, we got Brendan on here from Finn, right? I mean, that
Yeah.
is a
And
that Finn, that is a perfect example. If you are not adequately training your employees to like, if you are the CEO of a company or a CTO or whatever, and you're not adequately training slash enforcing training for your clients and for your employees, and you are basically purposely setting up, even if you're not doing it purposely, it is gross negligence. You're setting up your entire organization to get hit by a cyber
you
attack.
didn't even look at the next slide and you went right into it, right? Like you need to do what's called
There you go.
what we're talking about, right? Due diligence, right? Like you need to take reasonable steps to make sure that when your claims come in, you're not going to have any unexpected pitfalls. Because here's
Yep.
the other thing too, and I said this at the beginning of this deck, and I stand by this. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. We're all going to have an adverse cybersecurity incident as a business owner. It's going to happen, guys. The stats absolutely bear me out on that. Like my firm is being attacked daily, right? I know some of our customers that are being attacked daily, if not weekly, right? Like it's going to happen sooner or later. Somebody's going to get through the line of defenses we set up, and we need to make sure we're in a position. And that's why, Finn raid. They're all commenting in the thing. Hang on, I'm posting these comments. Pause. But Brendan laughed at you. Somebody said,
thanks, Brendan, for laughing at me.
And then,
Amanda.
And then Brendan said the Finn crew's here, so I think we're gonna get raided by Finn. Right?
Great, good.
But yeah, no, you need to do due diligence. You need to be looking at this and saying, what's your risk appetite? What is, where you stand at, and make sure you're not approaching that level of gross negligence. I think the majority of people I talk to don't want to be anywhere near gross negligence, right? Like, if anything, it's an ignorance problem. Like, they just don't know. They don't know what they don't know. And that's what we're educating today. ICS and travelers definitely cross, I firmly believe, the gross negligence category, right? Yep. It was not travelers being demonized. It literally was was it ICS or ISC? Am I saying no? It's ICS. It's ICS. I just misspelled that. ICS just didn't care enough, or they didn't know to care enough, and that cost them.
Yeah, it's either gross negligence or, at the very least, like we said before, misrepresentation. I mean, like I said before, you're signing a contract when you enter into a cyber policy, and you were not if you just kind of mindlessly checked all the boxes on a form and just handed it over, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, and that's really what it comes down to. So yeah, I'm with you on that.
They really did bring all the Finn people. They're all coming up.
Perfect. Should have said Finn Raid, but RAY, because Manta Ray. But whatever, it's too late. They missed their opportunity.
I'm gonna make a Pokemon joke. That's what it is. Okay, so diligence about what? What does that look like? I know we're talking scary language here. Let's give specifics. I'm all about educating and helping people understand what areas tactically they should be looking into if they're going to be proactive about managing the risk.
Sure.
If you have an office, getting a proper firewall is a great start. Turning on multi-factor authentication, putting in some management of your personally identifiable information. If you're collecting people's phone numbers, addresses, emails, whatever, you need to have a plan of how you're managing that and putting some reasonable security on that. You need to encrypt stuff. If someone steals a computer from your office, you don't want to run into data breach laws because you already have a missing computer. So turning things on like BitLocker, great idea. You need some kind of anti-malware. And to be clear, this is not go to a big box store and buy Norton antivirus. As much as some people might argue for Norton, I'm going to be firmly saying when they say anti-malware, they mean something that's what's called usually endpoint detection response software. It's what is the modern era of this. And then obviously with backup. So a lot of people know to have a backup, but most people I've talked to when they're not in the know don't know they're supposed to test their backups, because untested backups are just wishful thinking. If you have a backup and you get ransomware and you don't know that backup's going to work, you are now pinning on everything on an untested backup. You need to go in there once in a while, do a proof of concept, make sure your backup actually works so you can rely on it. I had a ransomware incident I was involved in. I had to consult on. And the first thing I asked was, hey, do you have a backup? Oh, yeah, we make a cloud backup. Oh, that's great. Let's go look at it, right? Go log into the cloud backup portal. Backup was never set up correctly.
Yep.
It was given all the little green checkmark boxes, but none of the data was there. They lost everything.
Also, another piece with backups to that end, right? So it's not just that backups are there and tested, but that they are in a place, so we like to say the word immutable, but they are in a place where they are untouchable by the threat actor when they come in. So if there was a cyber attack and you got ransomware, wouldn't you think the first thing the criminal will want to do is destroy your backups so that you cannot kick them off the system? I think that would make sense. So putting them in a place where they can't be touched is crucial. So there's
Absolutely.
that piece too.
Absolutely. I would also say planning, like proper planning goes a long way. So it's
Oh
having an
yeah.
instant recovery plan. Like that sounds scary, but just means if I get hacked, what's my plan like the next 5 days to get things up and running? Right? Like the faster you can get up and running, the faster you can start restoring your lost revenue opportunities, the less the insurance has to pay for lost revenue, right? Like it's
There's
a
a
win-win.
lower cost, but I mean, there's also this piece of it where all like I mean, we're business people. We think with business and that's our mindset, but there's also the emotional connection to a cyber incident. I mean, going back to what I said before, if you built this business with your bare hands, right? Blood, sweat and tears, you put yourself into this business and now that business isn't operating because your network is down. There is this anxiety that dwells up, this stress, this worry, what's going to happen? I don't know what's going on. And if you have taken the time to rehearse your incident response plan, know how you're going to react, know what has to happen to recover from this, you're going to be a lot more at ease than you would be if you had no clue what was going on. So, insurance, yes, this is important for insurance. This is also important for you, just so you have peace of mind in the event of an incident.
The proof's in the pudding. And remember, when you're ever in doubt, being able to prove that you're doing reasonable risk remediation can go a long way. I firmly believe if ICS could have disputed and shown that they were doing the MFA, like if they had the path to do that, A, they would have caught themselves first off because they would have said, oh gosh, this isn't across the board. But B, that does give them the leg to stand on and say, well, we know what they're saying, but honestly, we are doing it here. Let us show you, right? That's a different conversation than, oh gosh, we're caught with our pants down.
Yes.
Absolutely 100%. So what am I recommending? And I think you can tell me how you feel about this. I like risk assessments. I personally like risk assessments. Why do I like risk assessments? Because risk assessments acknowledge a simple fact. Every business is at least slightly different. They have their own unique needs, their own unique infrastructure, their own unique things going on, right? No business fits a cookie cutter mold 100%. A
Yep.
risk assessment acknowledges that and says, okay, let's evaluate what your realistic cyber risk is for your organization, not hypotheticals, not, oh gosh, you're a $2 million company and you're going to have $5 million of damages, right? Like that's not reasonable, nor is it real. It's, okay, what kind of PII are you managing? Do you have a lot of
Yep.
it? If you do have a lot of it, do you have a plan to manage it? Cool. How susceptible is your team to social engineering? Can they be tricked to give up stuff over email that normally would not be given out? These are things that you as a business owner or a business leader want to know because you now have data to make plans around it. You can go and say, okay, A, I feel better about our cyber insurance because I see we have risk. That's number one. But
Yep.
two, now with a risk assessment, if it's done right, we can go in and say, this is what we're seeing as a problem and break it down for you as the business owner or business leader in a way that you can understand and now make judgment calls. Hey, this is what I need to do. I see a problem and you've made it so I can understand it easily. Now I can do what I do best, which is make good decisions going forward on how to manage this, right? It's all about empowering the business leader to make the right call. That's all
That's
we
it.
want with the risk assessment. So I do say this part too. I don't like self-assessments. Why don't I like self-assessments? It's not just because I have a business that does risk assessments. Self-assessment, when you're evaluating yourself, oftentimes it's very easy to put the emotional blinders on, right? Or just you don't know what you don't know. A great example of this is if you're doing a book financial audit, like a bookkeeping financial audit, I almost always take it outside of my bookkeeper and take it to an independent CPA because if something in the books isn't adding up, I want to see maybe my CPA's just got a hole, or not my CPA, my bookkeeper's got like a hole, a blind spot, if you will. I like independent assessments because they're emotionally independent. They can keep a cool head and they know how to present things in a way that might be, how do I frame this correctly? A little emotionally charged.
Yeah.
We're talking about business and risk. This is not a comfortable conversation.
Well, here's a good example. When I was in high school, I was a little fatty, and I decided to do. I did everything to try and lose weight. It's like work out, or eat the right foods or whatever. But it's like the only person holding me accountable was me, and it made it very difficult to lose weight. But then I started doing a program where I actually had to go in every week and weigh in front of somebody. And now all of a sudden it was like, oh, someone's actually going to comment on this. I should probably actually try harder. And
Yeah.
that to me, with third party assessments, you're now being held accountable or being shown what's wrong from someone who isn't you. And you can't sweep it under the rug anymore. And I think that's the key component of all of that.
I work out from home, and even now I'm a little overweight, and I put all my data in my health app, and my health app is very point blank and telling me, because as long as I'm honest with the data, hey, your BMI is not okay. Yours not this, right? Like, is it comfortable? No, but it keeps me from going to a place of complacency. I'm constantly forced to push a little harder, watch what I eat a little closer. It's good for me, and I know it. It's a discipline thing.
Yeah. So then
Um,
imagine now there's actually someone tied to that on the other side, and they're calling to check in and say, hey, there's an issue here. Right. That's
yeah.
the third party assessment piece. When you think of it, it's you have someone who's not you telling you your baby's ugly and now we have a problem. So
Your
it's just
baby's
the reality.
That's awesome.
That's the reality. So
I break up cyber risk management into two components. I wholeheartedly think you agree with this, which is there's a proactive and a reactive component. The proactive component is learn what the new standards are. A risk assessment can be a great opportunity to see how you measure up against these new standards in the world we're in. You fulfill the new standards, and you test them regularly. You make sure that you're in a good shape. I like quarterly. That's my personal preference, but even annually, I'll take annually over nothing. And then the next thing you do is you get the right insurance plan. If you don't have insurance already, you need to go get it. Get the right coverage. Work with a qualified individual, qualified brokerage, a qualified agent to get the right price. The Fifth Wall Solutions, shout out to them right here. I would label them very much in the qualified space. And also to understand the fine print of your policy. The right agent should take you through what's covered and what's not, and get a sense of what your risk appetite is. If you don't have a lot of risk appetite, they can get more aggressive and help you find the right policy. Versus if you want to save some money, you have a higher risk appetite, they can also help you there too. We'll put it in chat, guys. If
that was an accident. I wasn't supposed to hit enter yet. But that's use that link if you are like, is my policy right? Is everything good here? I want to know more. We will review your policy for you, and we'll work right alongside Logan. So if there are any issues, he'll be the one to tell you.
I actually like risk assessments to look at insurance. So that actually, if you have a policy right now and you just want to get the whole digest of what do I need to do, if anything, there's a great opportunity here. So here's my special offer. Well, you posted yours, and that was very.
That was totally an accident. I was going to put that in at the very end, but now I'm going to put a picture of an elephant instead. No, I'm just kidding.
You're fine. You're fine. If you like your policy evaluated, Fifth Wall Solutions has an amazing offer. I'm going to put that on the screen one more time at fifthwallsolutions.com/discovery. They can go ahead and help you, give you some actual specific insurance advice, which I am not qualified to do. So please go bring it to them. However, if you're interested in looking at the proactive side of things, which I would strongly recommend you do, we're putting a special offer out today. For the first 7 people that scan this QR code on the screen, let me go ahead and minimize your comment. We're doing an initial risk assessment. It's self-service. It is not 100% comprehensive, to be clear. A risk assessment is usually a longer-term engagement. I usually need about 30 days, but it's a good place for you to go ahead and get started and see, do I even need a risk assessment? These first 7 people that scan this QR code, we take into a page, just put your email address in, and we'll send you a free self-service risk assessment, initial risk assessment that you can go through. It's about 25 questions, easy way to answer yes, no, put numbers down. It's a great place to start. And again, for 7 people, free of charge. So, Will, thank you so much for joining us today. I think that's their entire slide deck. We're only 7 minutes over, which is actually not terrible. Any final thoughts before we wrap up that you want to kind of impart to our audience?
Yeah, I think I said it a little earlier, and I just want to touch on it real quick, is that, again, the reason we talk about risk assessment, policy reviews, all this kind of stuff is that cyber insurance has become part of that overall cybersecurity strategy. You can't separate the two anymore. They're intricately linked. And carriers are continually growing their requirements when it comes to security controls to maintain your risk status. So that's really the key component there. Is cyber in general is an industry that is rapidly evolving, and because of that, you can't maintain the same security posture you had last year and think that's just going to be enough, because new threats emerge, new factors come into play, and carriers are consistently building their claims data, and they're seeing this thing actually helps reduce claims, so we want to
I have
require
been
that now.
saying the statement, things have changed for the last 3 years, and every year it's true, right? Like every year, even since last year, things have changed, because that is the world of cyber. It's constantly evolving. The threats are constantly changing. Again, we're not expecting individual business owners to be 100% on top of that, but you have to show due diligence, right? You have to try. And trying in a robust way is what's going to save your bacon at the end of the day.
Huge. 100%.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Again, I'm Logan, CEO of TTS, joined here by Will Brooks of Fifth Ball Solutions. Have a great weekend and stay safe out there.
See you, everybody. Thanks so much.